Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. Holly's Eldritch Expedition. Holly Arnold had always been drawn to the unknown, an insatiable curiosity that led her from one archaeological dig to the next. When she heard rumors of a long-lost civilization on the Isle of Wight, her excitement knew no bounds. Leading a team of seasoned scientists, she embarked on an expedition that promised to uncover secrets buried for millennia. The Isle of Wight had long been a place of whispers and shadows, its history steeped in legend and mystery. Locals spoke of an ancient civilization that predated even the Roman occupation, a culture that vanished without a trace. Tales of strange artifacts, ghostly apparitions, and unnatural phenomena surrounded the island, deterring many from exploring its depths. Holly, however, was undeterred. Her team consisted of Dr. Marcus Graham, a historian with a penchant for the occult, Dr. Sandra Patel, a renowned linguist and cryptographer, and Tom Bennett, a rugged field scientist with a background in geology. They arrived on the island in early autumn, the air crisp and the skies overcast, casting a grey pallor over the landscape. Their base of operations was an old, abandoned manor on the island's northern coast. The manor, once grand, now stood as a decaying testament to forgotten wealth. Its walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, its floors creaked with every step, and a pervasive dampness clung to everything. Yet for Holly and her team it was perfect. On their first day, they focused on the grounds surrounding the manor. Tom found traces of ancient pathways, overgrown with moss and ivy, leading deep into the woods. As night fell, the team gathered around a fire, sharing their findings and theories. Holly could feel the weight of history pressing down on them, an almost tangible presence that seemed to whisper just beyond the edge of hearing. The following morning, they ventured into the woods, following the ancient pathways Tom had discovered. The forest was dense, the canopy blocking out much of the daylight, casting long, eerie shadows. Birds were conspicuously absent, and the only sound was the rustle of leaves underfoot. The further they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as if the very air was thickening with unseen malevolence. Hours later, they stumbled upon a clearing, and at its center stood a massive stone structure, half buried and covered in lichen. It was unlike anything any of them had ever seen, its architecture alien and foreboding. The stones were etched with symbols and glyphs that defied easy interpretation, their lines twisting and looping in ways that made Holly's eyes ache. Sandra immediately set to work, sketching the symbols and making notes. She muttered to herself as she worked, her brow furrowed in concentration. This language, it's like nothing I've ever encountered. It's almost alive. As they explored the structure, Tom called out from one of the deeper recesses, "Holly, you need to see this." She hurried to his side and found him standing before a narrow passageway that descended into darkness. A chill ran down her spine as she peered into the inky blackness, an inexplicable sense of dread washing over her. "We need to go down there," Tom insisted, his voice tinged with excitement and trepidation. Equipped with flashlights and ropes, they descended into the passageway, the air growing colder with each step. The walls were lined with more of the strange glyphs, their glow faint but unmistakable in the dark. Holly felt a gnawing unease, as if the very stones were watching them. At the bottom, they found a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center stood a pedestal upon which rested an intricately carved box. Holly approached it cautiously, her flashlight revealing more of the unsettling symbols. "Be careful," Marcus warned. "We have no idea what we're dealing with." Ignoring his caution, Holly reached out and touched the box. The moment her fingers made contact, a shock of cold shot through her, and the symbols on the box flared with an eerie light. The chamber filled with a low, rumbling hum that seemed to vibrate through their very bones. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and the walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Holly yanked her hand back, but it was too late. The box opened, revealing a dark void that seemed to suck the light from the room. A cold wind whipped through the chamber, carrying with it whispers in a language none of them could understand. "We need to get out of here," Sandra screamed, her eyes wide with terror. As they turned to flee, the ground gave way, and they tumbled into the darkness below. Holly landed hard, the wind knocked out of her. She groaned and pushed herself up, her flashlight flickering weakly. Around her, the others were struggling to their feet, their faces pale and eyes wide with fear. They were in another chamber, larger than the last, its walls covered in the same glowing glyphs. In the center stood a massive stone altar upon which lay the desiccated remains of a humanoid figure. The air was thick with the stench of decay and something else, something ancient and foul. Marcus approached the altar, his face a mask of fascination and horror. "This is incredible. It's a sacrificial altar. These people, they worship something not of this world." As he spoke, the glyphs on the walls began to pulse with a sickly green light. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling Holly's mind with visions of unspeakable horrors. She saw cities consumed by darkness, skies filled with eldritch creatures, and the earth itself writhing in agony. "We need to leave now," Holly shouted, but her voice was drowned out by the rising cacophony. The ground trembled again, and the air grew colder, frost forming on the stone walls. Holly's breath came in ragged gasps, her heart pounding in her chest. She grabbed Sandra's arm, pulling her toward the passageway they had fallen through. "Come on, we have to get out of here." As they stumbled through the dark, the whispers grew louder, forming words that clawed at their sanity. "Join us. Become one with the void. Embrace the darkness." They reached the passageway, but it was now blocked by rubble. Desperation clawed at Holly as she searched for another way out. Tom was beside her, his face grim. "We need to find another exit. There has to be one." Together, they moved deeper into the chamber, searching for any sign of an escape. The air grew colder still, and the whispers more insistent. Holly's vision blurred, and she stumbled, catching herself against a wall. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves in another chamber, this one dominated by a massive, grotesque statue. It depicted a creature unlike anything Holly had ever seen, its form twisted and nightmarish. The glyphs on the wall seemed to writhe and pulse, their glow casting eerie shadows. Marcus approached the statue, his eyes wide with awe. This is what they worshipped. This is their god." The whispers reached a fever pitch, and the ground shook violently. Holly's mind was filled with visions of madness and despair, and she felt her grip on reality slipping. "We have to go," she screamed, her voice barely audible over the din. Tom grabbed her arm, pulling her toward a narrow passageway at the far end of the chamber. "This way, hurry." They stumbled through the passageway, the walls closing in around them. The whispers followed, relentless and maddening. Holly's vision tunneled, her mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. She could feel the darkness closing in, threatening to consume her. Finally, they burst into a small chamber, its walls covered in more of the glowing glyphs. At the center stood a stone archway, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly light. Holly knew, instinctively, that this was their way out. "Go, go," she urged, pushing the others toward the archway. One by one, they stepped through, the light enveloping them. Holly was the last, her heart pounding as she approached the archway. She could feel the darkness closing in, the whispers clawing at her mind. With a final, desperate push, she stepped through the archway and into blinding light. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on the forest floor, the sun shining down through the canopy. The air was warm and filled with the sounds of birdsong. She sat up, blinking in confusion. Around her, the others were doing the same, their faces etched with bewilderment and relief. "We made it," Tom said, his voice shaky. "We actually made it." Holly looked around, the memories of the chamber and the whispers fading like a bad dream. But deep down, she knew they had uncovered something ancient and terrible, something that should have remained buried. As they made their way back to the manor, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had brought something back with them, something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. That night, as they huddled around the fire, Holly heard the faintest whisper, a sibilant voice that seemed to come from the very walls of the manor. "Join us. Embrace the darkness." She shivered and pulled her blanket tighter around her. The expedition was over, but the real horror had only just begun. As the days turned into weeks, Holly and her team tried to return to their regular routines, cataloging the artifacts they had brought back and documenting their findings. Yet the sense of unease lingered, growing stronger with each passing day. The manor, once merely an eerie base of operations, now felt malevolent, as if it were watching them, waiting for something. One night, Holly was awakened by a soft whisper. She bolted upright in her bed, her heart pounding. The room was dark, but she could feel the presence of something, or someone, watching her. She reached for the flashlight on her bedside table and swept its beam across the room. There was nothing there, or so she thought. The whispering continued, now accompanied by the faint sound of footsteps. Holly climbed out of bed and, with the flashlight shaking in her hand, crept down the hallway. The air grew colder, her breath visible in the dim light. The whispers became clearer, repeating the same chilling words, "Join us, embrace the darkness." She followed the sound to the old library, the door creaking as she pushed it open. The room was filled with shadows, the flickering beam of her flashlight barely penetrating the gloom. On one of the shelves, a book lay open, its pages filled with the same alien glyphs they had seen in the underground chambers. As Holly approached, the whispers grew louder, seeming to emanate from the very pages of the book. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and touched the book. Instantly, a cold shock ran through her, and the whispers stopped. The silence was deafening. She closed the book and took a step back, her mind reeling. What had they unleashed? And more importantly, how could they stop it? The next morning she gathered the team. Marcus, Sandra, and Tom looked as exhausted as she felt, dark circles under their eyes and a haunted look in their gazes. It was clear they had all been experiencing similar disturbances. "We need to figure out what's happening," Holly said, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her. "We need to understand what we brought back with us." Marcus nodded, his expression grim. "I've been researching the glyphs. They seem to be some sort of ancient incantation, a means of communication with something. I think we might have awakened whatever the ancient civilization worshipped." Sandra looked pale. "But what is it? A god? A demon?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "But it's powerful, and it doesn't want us to leave." Tom slammed his fist on the table. "So what do we do? How do we stop it?" Holly took a deep breath. "We need to go back to the site. We need to find out more about this entity and how to appease it or banish it. We can't let it follow us, or worse, escape into the world." The decision made, they gathered their equipment and set out once more for the ancient site. The journey through the forest was even more harrowing this time, every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig setting their nerves on edge. When they finally reached the clearing, the oppressive atmosphere was even stronger, as if the very air resisted their presence. Descending into the underground chambers, they were met with the same eerie glow of the glyphs. The whispers started again, more insistent and desperate. Holly steeled herself and led the way to the main chamber, where the grotesque statue loomed over the sacrificial altar. "We need to decipher the rest of these glyphs," Holly said, pointing to the walls. "There has to be something here that tells us how to stop this." Sandra and Marcus set to work, their eyes scanning the ancient symbols with feverish intensity. Tom and Holly kept watch, the feeling of being watched more intense than ever. Hours passed, the whispers growing louder, the air growing colder. Finally, Marcus let out a triumphant shout. "I think I've got it. These symbols here, they describe a ritual, a way to banish the entity back to where it came from. Are you sure?" Holly asked, her heart racing. Marcus nodded. "It's our best shot, but we need to be quick. The longer we stay here, the stronger it becomes." They hurriedly prepared for the ritual, gathering the necessary items described in the glyphs: stones from the altar, water from a nearby underground stream, and a flame kindled from a specific type of wood found in the forest above. The instructions were precise, and any mistake could be disastrous. As they began the ritual, the ground trembled, and the whispers turned to screams. The glyphs on the walls flared with an intense light, casting the chamber in an eerie, otherworldly glow. Holly led the incantation, her voice strong despite the fear gnawing at her insides. The air crackled with energy, and a dark void began to form above the altar. The entity, its form a shifting mass of darkness and eyes, emerged, its presence overwhelming and terrifying. Holly could feel it probing her mind, searching for a way to break her resolve. "Stay strong," she shouted to the others. "Don't let it in." The void pulsed, and the entity screamed, a sound that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality. Holly continued the incantation, her words flowing from her lips in a language she didn't understand but somehow knew was right. Suddenly, the void began to collapse in on itself, the entity's screams growing more desperate. The ground shook violently, and the chamber seemed to blur and distort. With a final, ear-splitting scream, the entity was sucked back into the void, which then snapped shut with a blinding flash of light. Silence fell, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. Holly collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. Around her, the others were similarly exhausted, but alive. "It's over," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We did it." They made their way back to the surface, the sunlight a welcome sight after the oppressive darkness of the underground chambers. As they emerged from the forest, the weight of their experience pressed heavily on them, but they were free. Back at the manor, they packed their things, eager to leave the island and the horrors they had faced behind. But as they boarded the boat, Holly couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't seen the last of the entity. The whispers might have stopped, but the darkness they had uncovered would forever be a part of them. As they sailed away from the Isle of Wight, Holly looked back at the receding shoreline, a shiver running down her spine. The island, with its ancient secrets and eldritch horrors, had left an indelible mark on her soul. And though they had banished the entity, she knew that some doors, once opened, could never truly be closed. And in the quiet moments, when the world was still and the night was darkest, Holly could still hear the faintest whisper, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of understanding. Join us. Embrace the darkness. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had a great day.